You get on one of their hit lists and they try to move you along. Saturday night in Washington, D.C. was the White House Correspondents' Annual Dinner, which of course I don't go to. I boycott it because if you know about that organization, it's very, very liberal. And obviously they censor. You know, that night in Washington, D.C., the White House correspondents honored journalists from the Wall Street Journal who were imprisoned in Russia. Okay, they didn't say free Julian Assange. They didn't honor journalists like me that can't even basically get into their group because I won't take the vaccine. What's going on, though, is that the pro-Palestinian protesters surrounded the hotel. They were at the Washington Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C., and tons of protesters surrounded that event on Saturday night. So you actually had to walk through these protesters. Most people did. Obviously, Biden and Kamala Harris didn't, but most people had to walk through a sea of protesters to get to the event. And you saw people like Caitlyn Jenner and other celebrities, you know, out there with the protesters, saying bad words, getting into fights. So just prepare, because this summer is going to get wild. And you know, I have talked to tons of the pro-Palestinian protesters. They hate America. They don't care about our U.S. Constitution. And I tell them, why don't you just fly? Why don't you just travel to Gaza and stand up for what you believe in? Why are you trying to fight this out in the United States of America or any city in the world? You know, if you really believe in the pro-Palestinian protesters movement, you should just fly to Gaza. And you should stand up for them there. Obviously, none of us respect what the globalists are doing with Israel. But in the United States of America, we believe, most of us believe that Israel should exist. And, you know, a lot of us now, though, are saying that it's time for Benjamin Netanyahu to resign. There does need to be a new leader of Israel, but Israel should exist. And if all of these pro-Palestinian protesters continue, they stopped a whole graduation at USC, the college that I went to, that my family has a school of journalism at. They stopped that whole graduation. If that continues, you know, that's not what our First Amendment was meant for. Our First Amendment was to stand up for what you believe in peacefully, of course. So we're going to cover this. I mean, all the news today is about the different protests across the United States of America. The major protest has been in front of the Israeli embassy, the second that a man who was in the U.S. military burned himself to death 2 months ago in front of the Israeli embassy. So 24/7, there's an encampment in front of the Israeli embassy. There's also been an encampment of pro-Palestinian protesters in front of Secretary Blinken's house. So this is going to get really gnarly. And, you know, I rarely say this, but I do know that there are feds in these protest movements who are actually encouraging people to get violent and volatile. So if you see a fed is usually white, all-American, they usually have muscles, they usually look totally normal, and they say, oh, get violent, or they encourage violence. Number one rule, do not get violent in any of these protests. It should be like Martin Luther King or Gandhi, peaceful protests. That's what America was founded on. That's what the First Amendment states. So I am tracking who the feds are in each of these groups, and I am 100% interested. You guys all know that I have a phone just for whistleblowers. If you want to be a whistleblower and tell me what's really going on in your town, in your city, in your county, text me, 917-287-1314. Tomorrow, I'm going to go spend some time with a couple from Virginia who just got their door beaten down by the FBI because of what did or did not happen on January 6th, 2021 at the U.S. Capitol, and because they expose election corruption in Virginia. So this is going to get really spicy and really interesting. And I want to say thank you to the founder of America Happens, Them Miller, for always giving us the America Happens Network, where we don't censor. I want to introduce my first guest of May 2024. This is Michael Proper, and I met him in Las Vegas at the Sheriff's Convention, and what he was saying was so passionate and so enthusiastic. We're going to talk about decentralization. So go for it, Michael. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us everything about decentralization.
Well, I think first off, decentralization is a true and correct principle that we all get to live in our own personal lives. We see it in our bodies, we see it in the universe. It's all around us. But the key is the world is going to shift through some of the things that you talked about, these wars and rumors of wars and financial reset and digital control. I personally believe that those are the two objectives that we all talk about this pandemic called, COVID. But I don't believe digital control has to be centralized. I believe that decentralization is an alternative to the actual future that we can all be a part of. And in so doing, instead of being enslaved by some of these centrally controlling bodies and secret combinations, we can actually be freed by it. And so decentralization is not just a true and correct principle in our own physical lives, but it can be in the future digital world that we get to be a part of in the future.
So you're talking about the 620 phone. This is a key because when I talk to people who've been arrested by the feds come into your house whenever they want, usually early in the morning, 5, 6 a.m., and they take all of your phones, they take all of your computers. You basically never get them back. Approximately 1,500 American patriots have been arrested since the Biden regime took over the White House in 2021. That's serious. And that's why people like you, Michael, are so important. So tell us about the decentralization, just of the 620 phone. Just give us, we're going to have many discussions about decentralization, but this is the number one way they track you. When you use a phone, they can track you. So if people buy the 620 phone, what happens?
So you basically get encryption keys that get linked with your fingerprint or your ID. And it's actually done within the system of the phone itself. So it's not linked to a centralized system. Today, we have systems like Apple and Google that are the primary phones that are out there. And when you get those phones, you actually log into their systems. With Apple, you don't even own the phone, let alone you think you bought it. But you don't own the hardware and you don't own the software and the data that goes into their systems, your photos, your messages, it's technically legally not yours. And
so they own it. So
yeah.
They can watch everything we're doing.
And I would say that, they're not necessarily there from a watching standpoint. That wasn't their original goal and objective. They wanted to build devices that helped access technology, whether it was search, whether it was, simplicity. But ultimately, there's a governments that have been taken over by secret combinations, and I'll just leave it at that then have the ability to send in requests. And if you don't believe me, go read a book called Tools and Weapons. It was actually written by the chief legal counsel of Microsoft at that time. Now he's the president, and it was forwarded by Bill Gates. So you can actually read exactly what I'm going to talk about around the data is actually centrally controlled. So when a report or request gets sent in from governmental agencies, these individuals that you just talked about that were profiled, they can basically send in requests that says, I want to know this individual with this name, with this phone number, with this email address or email addresses or aliases, all this information on them. And what's important is, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, etc., they all are forced to legally comply and provide that data. What's the problem is the individual that's being profiled has no idea that it's actually occurring. And so the ability for these centralized systems to gather our identity, our contacts, our messages, our photos, our emails, it's really a hierarchical structure that is a very unwise process. If I were to share a screen, I would share some images that basically said a decentralized image and a centralized autonomous from a hierarchical structure coming from the top down. And so decentralization, where people can actually own their own data and their own identity and their own assets, is very important for the future. A lot of people, I talked with a gal that was very educated, but she said, I don't do anything that's digital. I just won't go there. And from my perspective as a father of 6 currently, I look at the future and think, that's not going to be the future for our posterity. That's not going to be the future for humanity. We have to build systems that are actually going to help humanity to improve. And that's really what I believe. Decentralization is not just a system. It's a true and correct principle within this universe. Like literally, if you look up Through a telescope, you can see it in the universe. Intelligently organized elements. If you look through a microscope, you can see it inside of us at the cellular layer. These cells just automatically know how and what to do. So decentralization is really important. The key is, people would call Bitcoin decentralized and the first decentralized thing. And I would agree it's a very good litmus test. But the way that governments are rolling it out, like Venezuela, they're rolling it out in a centralized approach. Why? Because Bitcoin takes an average of 10 minutes per transaction to actually settle, and someone wanting to buy a dozen eggs wants to get it within 10 seconds. And so what they do is they layer on it a Lightning Network, which was basically, if you look at the DNA of the Lightning Network, it's ties back to Visa, ties back to Bank of America, ties back to a lot of the different banks, ties back to some of the centralized secret combinations, BlackRock, etc. And ultimately, you're giving away your data and systems to centralized ecosystems. I'll give you an example. In Venezuela, if you don't want to wait 10 minutes to get a transaction, you just sign up for a new service. They call it is this positive service. And you give them your phone number, your name, and your date of birth. And with those 3 pieces of data and your public address for your Bitcoin address, they can triangulate who you are as an individual. And I don't know if you really understand what just happened, but you just centralized decentralization. So when you talk about the decentralization that we're talking about, you can see the technology similar to Bitcoin at digitalworld.earth. But then there's products and services that are basically with service providers around it and multiple different jurisdictions around the world, whether they're countries, kingdoms, nations, principalities, provinces, states, counties that are starting to adopt this as an option for their citizens or nationals or residents to say, I want to identify in a decentralized approach, so my identity is private. My ability to travel is private. And so if people can identify and travel in private, we're talking about a whole nother freedom that, just like when you mentioned earlier, you wonder why or how those individuals can just pop into the houses at 5 a.m. and just know that the individual's there. When you drive around on the roads, you have a license plate. That license plate, just like your IP address and MAC address and usernames and IMEI numbers, are all tracked and traced and linked. They've linked all of the actual automobile industry together. You wonder why the government came out and said, not only will we have programmable money in the future, but you will also have vehicles that will have microphones and videos in them and kill switches in them. Just put the pieces of the puzzle together and see what's in front of us. So for 14 years, I've been focused on with brilliant developers and teams from around the world, 13 countries, to basically build different clear companies that are focused on decentralized technologies for this future digital world. You can see the technologies at clear.co.com. That's all of the different technologies. You can actually look at the digital world at digitalworld.earth, and you can actually purchase these technologies at clear.store. And for you just going through and setting up the effort, we've got a special promo code for any of your listeners that can actually save on that phone that you held up there, that 620. They can actually save $100 on the already discounted. They're normally a $1,200 phone. And literally you'll find that we've got 5 different phones that we've launched. All but 2 are completely sold out. This is a $1,200 phone discounted down to $899. With your promo code, your listeners can actually snag it for $799 today.
That's incredible. And then you can set up the service with phone123.com. This is what the phone looks like. This is an incredible phone. I'm about to set it up later this week because I just don't like to endanger anyone. I have to be honest, Michael, do you know who calls me all day long? I mostly get phone calls from political prisoners. My phone rings. I have 3 phones, okay? So my phones ring off the hook by people who have been arrested by the U.S. federal government. And I'm very upfront about it. And because I'm a journalist, I have to be. But the people who call me are under duress. And, if anything happens in the future, I think it's all going to culminate in November. So this is my best for everyone out there. If we have an election in November, exposing the election corruption to people like me on my whistleblower number which is 917-287-1314. It looks ridiculous because I have a unicorn on it. But the bottom line is that, that is what's actually going to cause a lot of drama in the United States of America. And that's why it's really important that we all switch over to phones like the 620. So I'm going to be doing the switch because my iPhones are spying on me. They've been tape recording me without my permission. It's so weird. I have phone calls that I didn't think anyone could tape record them. All of a sudden the iPhone starts tape recording it and then they text it to somebody without my permission. So the iPhone is done. No one should be using an iPhone ever. I'm slowly but surely switching my life over to phones like the 620. This is the phone to get because it's huge and it has everything on it. Can you use apps on this phone?
It has its own marketplace and its own operating system that tied to an app store that has about 250,000 apps. You can see them at clearos.app. So they're all literally there, or on your phone, you just click on the Clear apps and it pulls them all up. So
I don't think it's safe for me to even go back to having one phone. So I'm going to slowly but surely switch from the iPhone to the Clear 620 phone.
I'll try and get
I'm going to have an iPhone and then I'm going to have the 620.
I'm going to try and, over the years, hopefully there's many, I'm going to try and convince you that if we do things the right way from a decentralized approach, we don't have to live in fear. And you'll be able to run two simultaneous numbers with two separate contacts that you communicate with them on one device if you like. So on that phone you can put in two separate, so you can see that it's actually got two separate serial numbers and IMEI numbers. So the Clear Cellular company that's behind this Clear phone, and I don't know if you know this, but the Freedom phone, the Armor phone, and all of the different Clear phones, they all tie from the same company, Clear Cellular. But Clear Cellular is one of 5 companies in the world that actually has a true, not just operating system marketplace, but also the IMEI numbers from global reaches and we're working on decentralizing the actual IMEI numbers. So what that means is the ability for an IMEI number to be linked with a type of Google account. So if you use a Gmail account, by the way, this phone is fully de-Googled out of the box, but you can do a couple things to work with Google. And the reason being
I hate Google. And I met the founders of Google 20 years ago and they were really cool. I think that once you start fresh and then you get successful like the Google guys, I think the feds come to you and they blackmail you and they take your company. They give you as much money as they can possibly, give you to buy you off, and then they blackmail you and then they take over your company. I think the feds, I think the CIA controls Google. My shows don't even show up on the Google search engine. I hate Google officially. So do you have an email address we can use that's also decentralized? Because that's our big problem. We don't have email addresses.
So we actually have built a service. It's not ready for prime time, but there is a decentralized email service. There's decentralized phone numbers. We can talk about that stuff in the future and tie it into some of the other beautiful things that you're doing. But we focus on everything that is decentralized. It's not just a phone, but the payment systems, the asset management systems. You can even log into countries with these phones and get your own decentralized ID, decentralized driver's license, decentralized passport, decentralized driver's plate, the actual plate that goes on your car because you've registered it. So we're working with physical jurisdictions and countries and kingdoms and states to actually offer individuals a whole new level of freedom. Imagine getting in your car and driving down the road knowing that you're not being profiled. Imagine driving and having your phone with you knowing that it's not being tracked. Imagine your vehicle not being recorded. And people may think that's just crazy. I know they're tracking me with my phone, but are they really tracking me with my vehicle? And I promise you, just like your phone, they're physically tracking your whereabouts. Again, it's not something that we need to live in fear, but the ability to be anonymous and have autonomy in the new ecosystem and future is very important. We had it 30 years ago. We literally had it. We had our privacy. If someone wanted to do something, they needed to go through a step. There was a chain of a process. An officer had to do certain things and do, whether it's physical warrants. But now in the digital world, they get more data on you digitally than they could physically. So, and it's not like we have to worry about from breaking laws. It's we have to worry about the system that is actually supposed to be providing value for us and governing, not government, but helping us is actually profiling and been weaponized against not just the United States of America, but humanity. These secret combinations are global and they tie to different industries, whether it's oil, whether it's pharma. Pharma and medical are two different animals, but they're tied. Insurance, the travel sides of it, whether we're talking airlines, where there's so many different ecosystems, namely the financial system. And decentralization, you're going to see in our lifetime, Corinne, literally, you're going to see the whole financial system, all stocks, currencies, and equities, all of them will shift over into a decentralized approach. People will own their own assets and they can't be taken from them, but everyone in the world will know whose they are. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of states, and states are not the bad actors in a lot of this. So most of the states are actually trying to do what's right. They're being infiltrated at the political layer, the educational layer, and all these. You already know about it. Your listeners already know about it. And for me, it's like, let's stop talking about all the problems and start talking about the solution. We know the election.
This is a solution.
Yeah.
This phone is a solution.
You and I met at Michael Flynn's event, right? And by the way,
I think I met you at the sheriff's. I met you at Sheriff Mack's event.
That's right. Well, yeah. We were at both. So I actually met you at both. And both of these individuals, Sheriff Mack, he's a man that stood up and did the right thing. He went back to the government and said, hold on a second. That's not right. What you're doing is not right. And so think about it. Our forefathers actually gave the power to the sitting sheriffs. Now, Sheriff Mack, a constitutional sheriff, they gave the power to the sheriffs in the counties. There's a reason why voting happens in the county. There's a reason why identity and marriage and all these other sorts of things happen at the county level. That's because the founding forefathers of the United States of America decentralized the authority. They didn't put it in one House of Representatives or Senate or even a presidential elected seat. Why? Look at what's happened. This is not a theory. Have these elections been thrown and overturned? Literally, what's happened is atrocious. The programmers for Dominion voting systems came out and said, we were paid to do this and this and this, which makes it so you can throw an election. They did it under oath. They were being honest. This was 4 or 5 elections ago. We're talking 15 years plus ago. This is not new news. For me, it's like I see, and I really respect General Mike Flynn, but when they're talking about paper ballots, it's not the solution for the future. Literally, the device in your hand enables voting real time for the future. And you could literally, it's through a simple scan. You download an app. These come pre-installed with a bunch of clear apps. I'll show your listeners real fast. So again, you just log in with a simple, and I've got a map up here, but you log in with a simple fingerprint. So you log in with this, and then these apps come up. Okay. So these are all decentralized apps. And these apps all basically tie to my fingerprint and the 12 words that you're given when you get the phone. So when you actually get the phone, you're going to open it up. You're going to see all the different technologies and organizations from around the world that it's built from and with, which, by the way, we're already planning for war. So the supply chain is actually built all out of New Zealand, because New Zealand will be a solid trading partner with certain countries. I won't be specific. But when you actually get the phone, you can actually put your 12 words in here, as well as with this is called Own Your Own Data. And on the back, you actually have your 12 words. So these 12 words, when you write them down, you pair them with your fingerprint on the phone, and that actually becomes your new identity. Not only the way to log into the phone, but you'll actually log into websites and new types of governments in the future. When I say new types of governments, I'm telling you, I've physically been in 21 countries in the last 20 months, literally. And so far, the countries are in a particular part of the world that spans half the world. I won't be specific. No, I will be specific. It's the Pacific Ocean, which encompasses over 25,000 islands and over 40 billion acres of land, which is more than half of this beautiful earth that we get the opportunity to live on. And these islands have operated in a decentralized approach. So decentralization is a natural native thing to them. So I've met with many countries, from Vanuatu to Tuvalu to Fiji to Tonga to Samoa to Aotearoa, which is the original name for New Zealand, to the Hawaiian Islands, which were illegally annexed about 130 years ago. So was, drum roll, Texas. So not only meeting with all of those people in the Pacific, but you've got Texas, you've got Nevada, you've got Arizona, you've got Idaho, you've got elements of Utah, which is an element I've spent a long time in. And then, believe it or not, California. These different parts, these different states have movements within them that are actually looking at a new way to govern themselves. And the type of decentralized technology that we're talking about here can actually enable that to become a reality. So I don't know if you're connecting all these dots.
This is so exciting.
Massive.
You've got to come back. Michael, you have to come back and tell us everything.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being such a truth whistleblower.
Yeah, now you have an example of what I do. So I do this pretty much every day, and I want you to come back again and again and again, and then we'll figure out what you really want to talk about, because we need to move to a decentralization. You know that.
Yep.
That's the highest level of the news.
It really is. It's massively important, and most folks don't even understand what it is, let alone how to adopt it. The way to adopt it, go to www.clear.store, grab whichever phone or device that you want. The particular 620 that Corrine has there, if you type Corrine USA, or if you use the URL www.clear.store/Corrine USA, it'll give you a discount of $100 off on that phone right there. So it's only $7.99 to get into it. The last set of models, literally, they're just gone. They sell out like that. So please snag them today. Start using it. It comes with support, remote support if you have it. If you need it, they literally can come on your phone, walk through it, teach you. And we're here for America. We're here for humanity to be able to stand up for truth and for what our forefathers originally set for this beautiful country we get to live in.
Thank you, Michael. You're amazing. You've got to come back on Monday. Now you see what I do. I'm going to have a sitting sheriff right now that I'm going to bring on. Thank you, Michael. God bless you. Peace.
Much love. Talk to you later.
God bless you. I want to bring on a sitting sheriff. This is Sheriff Bob Songer, and he's from Washington, the great state of Washington. How are you, Sheriff Bob?
Good. Yourself?
I am so good. I'm live in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to bring you on because you are a sitting sheriff.
Correct. Yes.
What's the biggest problem we're going to face for November 2024?
Well, if Trump's not elected, we're in deep, deep trouble.
Did Trump win 2020 in your county, in your state?
I believe he did not. Of course, you got to understand, we're in an extremely blue state, sanctuary state, run by a bunch of